Each crisis is more dangerous than the one before. So 1998, 2008, we're going to get to a point we may be there where the crisis is actually bigger than the Fed, bigger than the Fed's ability to stop. We are uncomfortably close. Now, it's impossible to know exactly how close because it's a complex dynamic system, and you can make very good predictions on complex dynamic systems as to the magnitude of the crisis, but it's very hard to get the exact timing. But I can say that we're uncomfortable because now we've been there twice before in recent years. 1998, we came within hours of shutting every market in the world. It began with a Russian default, by the way. August 17, 1998, Russia defaulted on their external debt and the ruble was grossly devalued. That started a global liquidity crisis, went around the world, ended up in my lap at Long-Term Capital Management, where we had $1.4 trillion of derivatives. And everyone goes, oh, long-term capital, you guys lost a lot of money in Russia. We didn't. We lost maybe $100 million in Russia, but we lost closer to $4 billion on everything else because in a liquidity crisis, people sell everything. It's not a question of, do you have Russian bonds? It's like, no, they sell everything. Spreads widen. Not enough collateral, margin calls, people being blown out of their positions. That's what a global financial crisis looks like. We cured that with a $4 billion all-cash injection sponsored by the Federal Reserve and 2 rate cuts, one on an emergency basis by Alan Greenspan. We got through that, but we came within hours of shutting every market in the world. Same thing in 2008. We all know, September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers, okay. People don't realize that, Morgan Stanley was days away from failing. Goldman Sachs was days away from failing. John Mack said so at the time. He said Lehman was begging for help. He said, sorry, I got enough on my plate. We're worried about Morgan Stanley right now. And then the Fed came in. And so think of it as dominoes are falling. So all the dominoes are falling and they're going to keep falling unless you truncate, drop a wall in. And that wall was the Fed. But here's my point. Each bailout gets bigger than the one before. Each crisis is more dangerous than the one before. You want assets that are going to be immune from a global liquidity crisis. What are they? Land, real estate, gold, silver, fine art. I see Andy Warhol, Marilyn Monroe has gone, they estimate $200 million. You could have bought that for $50,000 in the 1970s. That's a little more specialized, but there are, natural resources, water, et cetera, energy, oil. If you want to be in stocks, okay, get stocks of companies that are based on natural resources. They're such as ExxonMobil, Chevron. I'm just giving these as an example, but there are a lot of ways to protect yourself. But, a regular stock portfolio is not a good one. And, banks are going to be in distress. Money market funds are going to be in distress. That's what the liquidity crisis is. I point out that the dollar has been a cryptocurrency since at least 1979. That was the last year the Treasury issued a paper Treasury note, like you had a note, maybe somebody's grandmother still has an old one in the attic, but they had little, almost like, stamps, like you peel off a coupon and take it down to the bank and get paid. The last time they did that was 1979. So the dollar's been digital and message traffic has been encrypted since around 1980. But I think in terms of the impact on the dollar, this is, be careful what you wish for. This was exactly what I was saying earlier in terms of second and third order effects. And I warned the Pentagon about this, and I warned the Treasury about this, because I know how economic sanctions work. I've been very involved in that from the point of view of the intelligence community and also advising the government. But they can be powerful. But if you use them too much and too broadly, they actually lose all their impact, because the people you're targeting say, well, okay, no mas, I'm out of the dollar system. You've done it one too many times. And this is an example of that. We've never frozen a central bank before. We have now. We've never kicked an entire country out of SWIFT, with the exception of Iran, but that's a much more isolated case. We have now with Russia. And so instead of just sitting there saying, oh, gee, you got me, we can say, okay, let's go to a new payment system. Let's pick up a new currency. The Saudis are saying the same thing. And all of a sudden, if you're one of the top princes of Saudi Arabia, maybe Mohammed bin Salman, or any of the top princes, you have a yacht in Monaco, you have a house in Aspen, you have who knows how many houses and palaces and yachts around the world, private jets, and they're like, hey, actually, all that stuff could be seized, because that's what we're doing to the Russian oligarchs. And by the way, it's not limited to oligarchs. We saw this kind of neo-fascism in Canada very recently with Chrystia Freeland, who's the deputy prime minister, freezing the bank accounts and the crypto wallets of the truckers. Canada went so far as to criminalize it. If you supported the truckers under a recent interpretation of Canadian law through Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, that's a criminal act. So I told Justin, I said, come and get me. But my point being, so she's seizing the accounts of blue collar truck drivers and Biden's seizing the accounts of oligarchs, but it's the same thing. Okay, blue collar, multi-billionaire, but it's the same thing. Suddenly, Canada and the U.S., two of the number one, I think number 5 economy in the world, number 6 maybe, have frozen Canadian dollar and U.S. dollar accounts of people they don't like. Now, you can say it's for good reason, and Putin should have invaded Ukraine. I get it, but if you're a Saudi prince, if you're certainly Russian, if you're a Chinese oligarch, how comfortable are you with the dollar right now? I haven't met him personally, by the way. I checked him out. Looks like a thoroughly bright guy. But other than carrying Larry Fink's briefcase for a few months, I mean, he's a year maybe, he's never had a job outside of academia or government. So he doesn't really understand the real world and doesn't understand what we're discussing right now. So the answer to the question was that they didn't think this. They don't understand these knock-on effects. They don't understand how the international monetary system actually works. They don't understand the blowback. I mean, I'll give you another example. This one has received some publicity. So we throw all kinds of sanctions on Russia. So Russia said, okay, we're going to stop our exports, Russian exports of strategic metals and chemicals and other elements that everyone else needs for inputs in their manufacturing processes. And they put a ban on exports of nickel. Well, okay, so you need nickel to make batteries, so good luck with your electric vehicle. But, okay, so U.S. throws sanctions on Russia. Russia retaliates by banning nickel exports. The price of nickel goes to the moon, went up by a factor of 4 or 5. That's really not surprising. London Metal Exchange fell down. They had to close. Yeah. Okay, but who lost? There was a Chinese billionaire who owns one of the largest nickel mining operations in the world, who lost, I think, $5 or $6 billion. So here's Russia and the U.S. fighting an economic war, and the loser pops up in China. That wasn't on his radar screen, and that wasn't on anybody else's radar screen. But it's a good example where the damage shows up when you don't expect it. Russia had about 600 tons of gold, and today they have 2,300 tons. China had about 600 tons of gold, and today they have about 2,000 tons, just slightly less, that we know of. And they may have several thousand tons off the books in the State Administration of Foreign Exchange that we don't know about, because that's completely opaque. So Russia and China did exactly what we warned the Pentagon about in 2009, exactly, which is increase their gold reserves by a factor of 4 or more. But everyone's like, well, the Chinese yuan is going to be the global reserve currency. No, it's not going to be the ruble, but here's why. Well, there are a lot of reasons, but the main reason is when you talk about reserve currency, you have to understand what that means. It's not like the People's Bank of China has a bunch of $100 bills on pallets stacked up in the basement. When people say reserve currency, what they really mean is the currency of the bonds that they invest in. In other words, they're dollar-denominated assets in the form of treasury bonds or notes. That's what China actually has on their books, not like the dollars per se. So if you want to suggest or hypothesize that the Chinese yuan is going to replace the US dollar as a global reserve currency, where's the yuan bond market? I mean, it doesn't exist. Very small scale, very illiquid, no primary dealers, no issue trading, no auctions, no repo, no settlement clearance, none of the plumbing and the mechanics of a mature bond market such as the United States. And above all, they don't have a rule of law. I mean, at least if somebody reneges on a treasury bond, you can sue somebody, but you can't do that in China. So the absence of the rule of law, number one, the absence of the infrastructure, the plumbing, for want of a better word, are two reasons why the yuan and certainly the ruble will not replace the dollar as a reserve currency. However, what I was hypothesizing then, and I would come back to this, is you can create a brand new currency that does have all that stuff. And in my example, they used a Swiss bank, UK law, put the gold in a third-party depository. If you wanted some of the new currency, you could deposit your own gold and get some of the currency or trade with them around a surplus. So it was a replacement system, but you would need the gold to instill confidence. but they don't have bond markets, and they're not going to have them soon. So those, the yuan and the ruble aren't going to replace anything.